All right, welcome back. This is Weeknights. So we're back because it's a weeknight. I am JD, aka He Who Pods, aka Rearview Mirror.
And I am Dash, aka Dashing D, aka the real king of R&B. I don't even know if I can say that today with what we're gonna talk
Probably
about.
not,
No, I'll just be cool, Grandma. Not really.
but not really.
Yeah, not really.
I think that should be a shirt.
It should be.
Yeah.
Should be coming soon
All right. So, a while ago, this documentary came out about a record label called Stax.
on
Well,
Max.
I gotta be on Max. Yes, thank you. And I gotta be honest, I never heard of Stax, but I heard good things about it and was like, yo, we gotta check this out.
Yeah.
So it's only 4 1-hour episodes. Excuse me. Um and I finished it. So I'm here to talk about it.
Also, when you heard it, you were probably like, or when you watched it, you were probably like, wait, but I didn't know Stax, but I know Stax.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. And I actually said that to my daughter because
Yeah.
we watched some of it together.
Yeah. So I mean, some of the greatest hits are
Oh yeah. Listen,
came
we're
from
gonna we're
that.
gonna definitely get to that.
Yeah. So you
And if you
watched.
haven't, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say you watched more of it than I did. Not for any particular reason. I just haven't finished it yet, but I did see the first episode. So, we'll rely on you for your uh your review.
Yeah. I will say this. I'm about to spoil the hell out of this show because it's hard not to if you're going to talk about it. So anyone who still wants to see this and doesn't want it to be spoiled, you should skip about 20 minutes.
Also, documentaries are about things that happened in real life. So, is it really a spoiler?
I don't think so, but I just don't want people to be like, "Oh my god, you
Yeah.
ruined the whole thing. I was going to watch it and now I don't even want to anymore because you said all this stuff."
I mean, I'm gonna sound grumpy, but it's a little ridiculous to say that people spoiled a documentary for you. It does. It literally doesn't. It happened.
Yeah,
Like, it's
it's
not.
history.
It's a part of history. If just because you didn't know the facts doesn't mean, like, when you read a history book, is that those are not spoilers that you're reading. Like, it's actually, like, let's stop it. I just feel like spoiler culture is a little ridiculous at this point. It's like a documentary is fine to spoil. It really happened. You didn't know it. Well, too bad.
I agree.
So
Um,
carry on.
how should we do this? Should we break it down by episode? Should I jump around?
You can
What do you
jump
think is
around.
the best way to jump around? Okay.
Yeah, I think you could jump around.
Um, so the biggest star, arguably, of the Stax history, the Stax label, the Stax franchise, uh, arguably, well, they say it's not arguable in the doc,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm gonna say arguably was Isaac Hayes, and I had no idea that Isaac Hayes was a producer, an arranger,
Right.
a writer,
Right.
played multiple instruments. I did not know that. I just knew Isaac Hayes sang and he had the radio gig when we were younger. That's
Right.
what I
That
knew.
me too.
So they start talking about Isaac Hayes early, like episode 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
But man, the rise of Isaac Hayes that came much later on was crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't know any of that stuff because we weren't alive. A lot of this doc took place in the 60s and 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And we weren't alive. I mean, one of the big things that happened, I was watching it with my daughter. I looked at her and I said, "Hey, my dad was 1 when this happened." She was like, "Oh wow, this really is old." And I was like, yeah. Like my dad was 1. So
Well, you just said the
I
system
mean,
sounds like my parents were babies.
yeah, like one of the big events happened in 67. My dad was born in 66.
Yeah.
So
Really?
like crazy. This is years and years before we were born. So really, really interesting stuff. Um, and that was one of the wildest things to me. Like, there's a lot of different information that I obtained watching this docu-series. I still have some questions because it ends with not every stone is not turned when it's over.
Right.
And there are some things I'm curious about. I might have to look up. But man, wow, who knew that Isaac Hayes was this talented and around this long? Like, I had no idea.
I was really excited when he came on the screen just because that voice is so intoxicating and it just takes you back.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if anybody's seen Inside Out. I know you have, but I'm gonna spoil something.
Okay.
When nostalgia keeps trying to come, voice like nostalgia coming through the door.
Yes. Yes, it is.
And because we are, you know, middle middle aged,
Hey, yo,
I
speak for
think that's what they
yourself.
call us. Because we are, because it's based on life expectancy, but because we are middle aged, you know, we experience nostalgia, and it just, as soon as I was about to say that, you know, Isaac Hayes invokes this nostalgia in me, I thought of this old lady coming out of the door.
With the remember, remember when?
Because this was something that just hearing his voice, seeing his face just kind of took me back to like just being a kid and like being in the car with my dad and the radio playing, and you know that voice was just, you couldn't miss it.
Right.
So that's so sorry if you don't know what we're talking about, but it immediately made me think of nostalgia. So yeah, I think it's really cool. I did not know that about Isaac Hayes. Um,
Yeah, me either. Like when they, I mean, as soon as he's introduced in the doc, it's like, oh yeah, so Isaac Hayes helped write this song, and I'm like, Isaac Hayes, that early?
yeah,
Okay, that's weird, but that's not what we know him for. And man,
they were writing hits.
crazy. Yeah. So what's interesting is this record label that started in Memphis, Tennessee, started so early compared to the record labels that we know.
Hmm.
And a lot of the things that they put out were I want to say are iconic. I was going to say were, but are iconic still in our culture. Before we get to like Shaft or any of the stuff that really, really broke records and did these crazy things, way before that, they were cranking out hit after hit after hit after hit.
Hold on, I'm coming is in like every rom com today.
Yeah,
It is, that is huge. And that's how, I mean, I know we talk about like the culture and whatever, but that to me transcends a lot of these songs you hear in mainstream media today. You don't even realize
absolutely.
this is where it came from.
I had no idea. I have to be very honest. There were so many songs that they
Yeah.
spoke about the creation of, and like just hearing them speak about how these songs came to be and the way that they were put together and the things that these artists were going through at that time is so crazy. Like in the second episode, they take these artists who were quote unquote local stars. And wait, did you get to the part about pirate radio?
I did actually.
Yo, I broke down pirate radio to my daughter, and she was like, wait, what? That's crazy. And I was like, yes. And I love that. You
Also,
mean to tell me there were dudes on ships just just broadcasting American music because Europe was not allowed to listen to music for more than an hour a day? What?
well,
Excuse me, excuse me. Pop culture music. for more than an hour a day.
But so I didn't get much far past that. But is that why today? Is that why piracy? Is that why that's called that? Like, is that why pirating music was it was the terminology?
I'm gonna assume yes. I don't know that for a fact, but I had the same thought because when they said pirate radio, at first I'm like, what does that mean? Because they kept showing ships at first,
Well, I
and
was gonna say. Oh, go ahead.
is it because they're just dudes on ships? But then when they said what it meant, I'm like, oh, so that's why it was pirating music back then, right?
Right,
Like in the
because
90s.
when they first said pirate radio, before they even showed the ship, I was like LimeWire. That
Right.
was my thought, and I said,
I
wait,
had the thought later, but
is
yes,
this?
exactly.
I said, but okay, so
So there was a DJ
LimeWire.
on a ship taking the
Yeah.
music from America that he liked and thought other people would like, and he was
And did.
broadcasting it into this one specific European station all day.
Okay. I thought that
And
was so
so,
cool.
oh, I listen, as a rebellious person, I thought this was like, this
Yeah.
dude was the man. Like, that's how you serve your country. You feel what I'm saying? Like, being in the military, I am not knocking it. But this is how you serve a country who's being stifled. They can only listen to pop culture music for 1 hour a
1 hour.
day.
Which means you
Could
have to
you
be really
imagine
selective
if
about
you
what
could
you
only listen
put
to
on there.
pop culture music for an hour a day?
I used to only be able to watch TV for 1 hour a week.
So
And
you get it.
right, because the idea here, and this is what I was just saying about the music too, is that you have to be super selective about
Of
what
course.
it is. And when
Yeah. So he was, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when my parents were being really mean, they would be like, pick one show, pick
Right. And
one show.
so what was happening was before this pirate radio thing, they only knew like these huge hit records
Right? Yeah.
until this pirate radio thing. And what happened was they speak about the European nation, how they were so thirsty for just anything else because they were like, we know there's more shit out there.
Right.
How can we get it? And then this pirate radio thing took off. So part of that was he was one of the many people enamored by the Stax sound, right? The sound that Stax record was putting out, and it became labeled as the Stax record sound because they had certain horns and certain instrumentation on their music that was kind of a staple in the music they were putting out at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So they get word that, yo, y'all have a huge following in Europe. You should send your artist out there.
Yeah.
And so they send out their three big acts, which Otis Redding was one of them. That's the person we know. The other ones we didn't. Most people don't know them, which is unfortunate.
Well, okay, so Sam and Dave were the ones who did "Hold On, I'm Coming,"
Yes,
and then there was another,
and Green Onions, if I'm correct.
and Green Onions. No, Sam and Dave weren't Green Onions. That was Booker T and
MGs, Booker T and the MGs.
the MGs. Um, yeah, I have in my notes. Is that like LimeWire?
There you go. There you go.
Um,
So listen,
I guess that's
they
all.
went over there. I say all of that to say they went to Europe and went on a tour, not knowing what to expect. And they had their world rock. They were like superstars in Europe. There was no segregation, and the things that were going on with black people in America were not happening in Europe. And one of them even says like, we didn't know what to expect, and a lot of people didn't know what to expect with the music. That's where they were blown away. But we went in a hotel and we were treated like everybody else. I didn't know what to do. We walked in, not even knowing if we could walk through the front door. And they're greeting me talking about, good evening, sir. How are you today?
Yeah, people
So
often say they
he
feel
said
more
there was,
comfortable in Europe being a person
yeah,
of color.
he said, man, it was crazy over there. Like we were treated like equals. But then you know what happened? Those same artists had to come back after the tour to division and segregation and white only bathrooms. And they even spoke multiple times about how people would come to Stax Records and see black and white musicians being equally treated equally in the way they were making music, the way they were speaking freely, and people were blown away, both black and white people. Like, that's that's allowed? Like, wait a minute, you mean a white guy is on the drums right now? How's that? What? A black dude is the lead singer? What the hell? And so they were doing all of these things that were just unheard of at the time. And part of that means that these artists had to endure some things that we couldn't fathom. And
Like
so
riding the freight elevator because you're not allowed to be in the lobby because you're black.
can't even enter. Right? I was selling that to my daughter because they were talking about that same young lady later on. And I
Right.
showed her, I said, "Oh, this girl got a record deal at 17, but she couldn't go to a restaurant because the head of Atlantic Records said, 'Oh, I want to sign her, but we can't eat at a restaurant together.' So he had to get a hotel room. And he got a suite at the hotel. She couldn't walk in the hotel. She had to go up through the service entrance. And what's interesting is just the mind frame, the mindset of this young person who's excited. She said, at that time, I didn't know that, like, it didn't click to me that I'm in a service elevator. This is scary. This is messed up. I was just there nervous about the record deal. I was just excited and nervous.
And the white dude she was with, Stax, he was like, I was afraid.
Right. He did the
He
complete
himself
opposite.
said, right. He himself was like, he's afraid. And
Yeah.
I mean, I don't apologize or sympathize usually with the other side of things, but the idea that people would see, or people would know that, like, what are you doing with this black girl, traveling with her or going to this hotel with her, or these things were unheard of.
Yeah.
And then
And he
you
said, like,
think
he
about,
never even thought about the experience that, oh, we got to go through a different entrance. We
right,
can't. Right. He was like, I
it
felt
never occurred
so
to them.
bad.
But we take for granted relationships like, I don't know, Clive Davis and Whitney Houston. Like, that was
And
very
and
normal to us. But
Clive Davis came up, by the way.
oh, did he? Okay, I probably didn't get to that part, but
No, it's episode 4. But when you finish, I'll get to Clive Davis.
yeah, I just feel like that's one that pairing that sticks out in my mind that kind of reminds me of that. No one thought anything of that.
Right.
It just was what it was, but the times were so different by the time, Whitney and Clive would have worked together, that I don't know. It's just bizarre. It's bizarre to think that that was the world before we knew it. We think we know racism today, but listen,
Right. Yeah, it's
yeah,
interesting how much historical stuff is in this. Not even music, just American history
yeah,
is taking part at the same time as the things going on with this record label.
yeah, yeah.
So actually, episode 3
Mm-hmm.
speaks about Mar- there's so much to talk about in this doc, but all right, let's go to Clive Davis and then we'll go backwards.
Okay.
So at one point, um, Stax Records has existed like 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
Ridiculously successful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we got Oscar winners, we got Grammy winners, we got crazy chart topping records. We survived a really bad record deal where Atlantic Records screwed us over. We went independent, all type of stuff. And now we need help as an independent label because the founder, that same guy who was in the elevator with the young lady at 17 years old, he's ready to leave. He feel like I did enough here, I'm done. And so he tries to sell his shares to the now co-owner, uh, and the guy goes to CBS Records, who has a terrible reputation where black people feel CBS doesn't like us. CBS is racist. And Clive Davis is the executive, and he says, I've already been trying to change that. I would love to work with Stax Records. And him and the owner at the time, I think his name is Al Davis or Davis Al, something like that. He was a promoter who put Stax on the map. He was a DJ turned promoter who put Stax on the map, later became a shareholder and vice president, and now will be the owner of the company after this deal goes through. He gets a deal with Clive Davis. This is unheard of. When we were watching this, my jaw dropped. And my daughter said, "What happened?" I said, "That's unheard of." That does not exist. And as soon as I said that, what did the TV say? Man, at that time, that was unheard of. Like, that didn't even exist. So what happens? The guy goes in there and says, this is what I'm trying to do with Stax Records today. This is what I think we could do. And Clive Davis says, I'm totally on board. That sounds amazing to me. Let's do it. And Stax Records signs a deal with CBS Records where they maintain ownership of the records they put out.
Hmm.
And this is where it gets crazy. CBS handles distribution, but only gets 15% royalty of all records sold. I'm going to say that again for those in the back who may not have heard me. CBS Records only gets 15%
That's wild.
of royalties of all records sold from Stax Records.
That is
Clive
unfortunate.
Davis signed that that deal.
Well, at least we know that there were honest people back then.
Well, this is right after Jay Rexler, a few years before from Atlantic Records, completely screwed over Stax with the opposite deal. Because
Right.
Stax did a handshake deal
Uh-huh.
with Jerry Wrangler
Wexler.
and Rexler, thank you.
Mhm.
Jerry Rexler, and Jerry Rexler screwed them over when it was time to put it on paper. So
Right.
everything that Stax put out, Atlantic, you didn't get to this yet if you only saw episode 1.
I think I did get to that though.
Only the big, no, they get way more into it in like episode 3 or 4.
But
They actually
they do
show the
mention.
contract.
Oh, okay.
So they thought that Clyde Davis only messed them up about 1 or 2 artists, the young lady and her
Mhm.
dad.
Yeah.
Come to find out, it was way more when they signed the real deal later on. So what ends up happening is anything Stax puts out, not only do they get, yes, Atlantic Records distributes it, but it says that any record they put out, Atlantic Records owns in perpetuity. They show the contract. It says any working project released is owned by Atlantic Records forever. It showed the word forever on the screen.
But here's the thing. That to me is like the indication of, or that is like the what probably one of the first iterations of what would be the music industry, because that,
Oh yeah,
I mean, that to me sounds more commonplace than
yeah,
the other deal that you talked about. That sounds
absolutely.
like what people's nightmares come true in this day and age. I mean, a lot of
And
people are now understanding it more and either trying to get their music back, or the rights to their music back, or making deals that allow for ownership,
yeah,
full ownership. But this sounds like this was, the beginning of the nonsense.
yeah.
The
And
beginning of
so
the predatory nature of the music industry.
absolutely, and we see that more later on because come to find out, Clive Davis got caught up in some stuff with a friend of his who had scandals going on with the mob and other people, and CBS fired Clive Davis.
Oh,
And when new
saw his
executives,
sordid.
yep, and when new executives took over, they said this deal with Stax got to go, and all hell broke loose after that.
Oh, that's crazy.
So let's just talk a little bit about something else. Let's go to historical piece. Cause I said I wanted to jump back to that.
Yeah,
Um,
I know we
you
got some
know,
topics too.
yeah, I want to highlight a couple crazy things.
Hmm.
One is one of the last speeches, I believe the last speech that Martin Luther King gave was in Nashville. And one of the dudes from Stax recorded it because he came to Nashville to speak about the things going on in Nashville with the garbage man union, the sanitation union,
Hmm.
because 2 black sanitation workers were crushed to death in the back of a garbage truck. And it seemed to be murder. And there was stuff going on, and he came to speak out and speak about it. And the hotel balcony that Martin Luther King was killed on, you know the one?
Mhm.
That's where Stax Records would chill at.
Oh,
That's why he was there. He stood there because that was known as the place where blacks and whites get along. All the people from
I never
Stax
knew that.
Records, me either. All they show footage of all the people from Stax Records, blacks and whites, like swimming in the pool, joking around, hanging out. And one of them even says the studio was like our home as the Stax family. That hotel was our second home. Anybody who knows us knows if we weren't at the studio,
Mm.
we were at that hotel. And so they were in this hotel where Dr. King was killed. And they speak about how that caused so much pain and strife, not only for the black community, but for the label, because this
Yeah,
happened like where we're always at.
yeah,
And
that
so going back to Isaac Hayes was like, nothing was the same for me after that. I was in a deep depression for so many reasons. I couldn't write, I couldn't create. I just went quiet for a long time.
crazy.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about crazy in a positive way.
Okay.
That same guy who was a promoter and then the co-owner of Stax Records, that guy was a genius. That guy, when they became independent, came up with an idea to borrow money from the bank. Excuse me. And from various places, whatever. That part's not important. The important part is this. Stax got screwed over by Atlantic Records, and they needed to reestablish themselves as an independent label. Cool. That dude said, all right, here's what we're gonna do. A lot of people have copied our sound. A lot of people are saying our sound is dead. We're gonna do brand new stuff. He said, I sat at the table with a legal pad for hours, just coming up with different style albums. He says, so I thought about our roster and I put a bunch of albums together pairing women artists and men artists so they could do a joint album. Then I sat and thought about all our people who play instruments and said, all right, we're going to do just an album where people play guitars. This guy came up with 28 different albums and for like 3 months had cats in the studio 7 days a week for as many hours as possible. People were saying in the doc, like, at one point, I just went home, took a shower, and came right back.
That's really smart.
3 months. Yo, they came up with 28 albums. 28 you know how much material is 28 albums? This is not like a guy at a computer making beats off stuff that he just decided to throw together. We're talking about many people playing instruments, writing songs, coming up with
Yeah.
ideas,
No.
coming up with hooks, crazy stuff. And part of that is the resurgence of Isaac Hayes and the birth of Isaac Hayes as a singer. Because he said, yeah, I was an arranger, a producer, a songwriter, but I really wanted to sing. And before, there was no room for that. Otis Redding was the king of Stax.
Yeah.
I didn't, before he passed away, which we didn't even speak about, I guess we'll try to get to that in a second, but it was like crazy. And Isaac Hayes becomes this crazy star. Isaac Hayes not only becomes a crazy star, but then that same guy who came up with the idea for 28 albums, he said, uh, we got to figure out a way to connect with the black community on a bigger level. So he went out to Hollywood and his connections there, and he decided to have Stax Records do the score for guess what movie?
Well,
Shaft.
okay. I thought Shaft, but I was like, I don't want to be
They
wrong.
did the score for Shaft, and Isaac Hayes came up with the theme song.
You're damn
And then, you damn right.
right.
And then they talk about, and I have my daughter here, like, you hear this shit? And he said, we started buying. He said, he came up with this idea after we won the Grammy to win an Oscar. I said, if I could get Isaac Hayes to win an Oscar, we'll go to a place nobody has ever been before as a label. And so he tried to get an Oscar nomination for Isaac Hayes. It wouldn't work. He said we needed white people listening to our music. I went and I bought BOUGHT. I bought radio time at all these different white radio stations. And people were hearing it more and more, but they still said it was black. It was black. It was black. So he went and paid a college band who was going to be on TV for a big college game and paid them to do the Shaft theme song when they came out. And so the college band did the college themes, the Shaft theme song, and now the Oscar nomination happened. Yo, they did so many just
Innovative.
thank you, innovative stuff. And it's like, wow, look how crazy innovative they were. Then they started getting into the black community. They wanted to have a presence in LA, and they wanted to have an office in LA because they felt like even though now they were on a national level, the West Coast really didn't know Stax or their music. They put together a huge concert festival, really, and do a doc. Crazy. And they tried to get Hollywood people to come do it, but the Hollywood people were all white. And the guy said, we can't do a black film with all white staff. So he went to a college in Cali. Can't remember what college it was, but he goes to a college and says, who can make a film? They say, oh, we just got a whole bunch of graduates that got degrees in filmmaking. He hired all these college kids, 20, 22, 20, 19, 7, these young guys. And they filmed a doc that later had this huge release. And at the release, the movie release, you see Red Fox. Everybody who's a huge star is there. I'm telling you, crazy. And so they show all this footage of this concert / festival that they did in the LA Rams Stadium, 112,000 people.
That's amazing.
And J. Cole took their idea.
Did he?
The concert was $1. I said, oh, maybe that's where J. Cole got it from. I'm joking. I don't know if that's where J. Cole got it from. But J. Cole did $1 in a Dream concert twice. He did 2 different tours of that. And so I said, oh, maybe that's where J. Cole got it from. But man, it's just, there's too much to even talk about. We could do this for like probably 2 hours. But I left Otis for last on purpose. They speak about Otis, how he came in the game, how his music was so different than what they were doing, the way that he would be with audiences, and the way he made money off of royalties when people started remaking his songs. I have to be honest, I did not know that Otis did R-E-S-P-E-C-T. I thought that was an Aretha Franklin song. I didn't know that was Otis' song. And so they interviewing her, and she's number 1. She's number 1 on Billboard. Oh, by the way, Stax had all these chart-topping successful records, and including Isaac Hayes. They just had all these number 1 like Billboard and top records. How we didn't know that? I feel like this is an important docuseries for our culture. But anyway, Otis comes and's killing the game. He is making crazy money. He's got his own private plane. He's got a ranch. Now we know where Kanye got it from.
Right.
But he got his own ranch, all this fly stuff. So much so that there was terrible weather and they had a concert somewhere. And Otis says, and we get into this concert. And they speak about Otis and some of the band members of this really, really young high school age band. They're like 17 and 18 years old. People are either in high school or just graduated high school, called the Barkeys. The Barkeys, I think it is. And almost all of them get in the plane except like 2 of them. And the wind and the rain was so bad that the plane didn't make it. And they even speak about Otis becomes obsessed after they went to Europe with the Beatles. And they speak about the first that we know of posthumous song. Otis Redding had a song that he came up with where he played it on the guitar and he just sung it.
Mm-hmm.
And they had those vocals, but nothing else.
Yeah.
And that became one of Otis' biggest songs. But he had passed on already. Um,
What
what's the name of the song? Go ahead. I'm gonna find the name of the song.
what I found interesting and kind of something that actually spoke to me was when they first talk about Otis Redding, because obviously I didn't see all of it, but in that first episode when they first talk about Otis Redding, it's after he records These Arms of Mine, and they all speak about how it made them feel and how it was just such a moving record that he recorded. And the one
Right.
guy, I cannot remember his name, and I feel bad for not remembering his name, but I did write down his quote where he said, "It just took me to my home and my heart and my place."
Yep.
And I actually replayed it just so I could write it down the way he said it, because if music can make you feel that way,
Right.
that's great music. Like it's
Facts.
music
Oh, I know
should
what
take
song
you
it
to a
was.
place. Music should make the lady come through the door, the old lady come through the door,
Nostalgia.
and make you think of a time,
Right.
in your life, or something that makes you feel like home or
Yeah.
love, or you know what I mean. So I that really spoke to me. I was like, I gotta write this down.
The
Also,
song is
question for
the
the
song
pod.
is right. The song is Sitting on the Dock of the Bay.
I know that
A
song.
record, of course you do. Watching the ships roll in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
interesting.
that's the last song he wrote before he passed. That was recorded.
Wow.
And they only had his vocals and him playing the guitar. And this is the first record where they had to go in
Mhm.
and build around that piece
Yeah.
and create the entire song just off that piece.
Wow.
But it did millions of records right after. It sold crazy.
That's yeah.
They
That's
said it was one of his biggest hits, and it was after his death.
wow.
Yeah,
Really interesting. I didn't hear that.
yeah. It was a great doc. There's stuff I left out. I know I spoke about a lot of it, but there's just so much historical stuff that goes on simultaneously. It's a really, really good doc. They did a lot of great stuff, and like most great stories, it had a really sad ending. Um, so I think people should watch it. I thought it was great, extremely informative, very enlightening, and just the way that they were innovative and ambitious, man, is crazy. Like
Yeah.
crazy.
I mean, the first episode alone uh is great. So
Yeah. Oh
I
man, and if you want to talk
definitely.
about hip hop, the samples that hip hop has sampled from Stax alone,
Oh yeah,
whoa,
of course,
whoa.
of
Like
course.
they start playing an Isaac Hayes song, and I'm like, I know this.
Heard
Why do I know this?
this before.
Because it's Jay Z "Can I Live" that sampled it. That's why.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, bim, 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 bim. I'm like, wait a minute, nigga, that's Hove. No, nigga, that's Isaac Hayes.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I'm gonna finish watching it, um, and hopefully, someone who saw this will also find it to be an interesting doc to watch.